Hello guys! So last week I posted my first ever bullet journaling video, and in less than a week it has already amassed almost 300 views, which is very high for my channel. So I decided that since I don't have another flip through ready for today, that I would go over some of the tools that I use in my bullet journal, and maybe that will be helpful for some of you guys. So I mentioned in my last video that I used a art and design toned sketchbook that I found in Japan. Again, it's not something that I would probably continue to use. I'd probably use a Strathmore toned sketchbook in the future. But this is what I'm using right now as far as the actual bullet journaling goes. Now for the tools that I use, I'm going to go over some things that I use real quickly. Of course, stencils are always super helpful. They give me a straight edge on one side, and then of course ovals and circles are very difficult to get perfect. So there's no shame in using a good set of stencils for certain shapes that you want to be repetitive and uniform. I also use, of course, a ruler, basic supply. Now for the pencils that I use, this is a case that I actually picked up in Korea, but you can find it probably, I've seen them in Michaels before as well. They're usually in the paint section because they are made for paintbrushes, but they work great for pens. This one has a little band, and I can just keep it in my backpack. So it's really great for traveling and being on the go and taking everything with me. I will tell you though, if you go through airport security, they will always take this out, just because all the pens lined up next to each other at the top, some of them look like knives or really sharp points, so a lot of the countries that I went through, they would take this out and go through it and look at all the pen tips. But it did go through. They let me keep it, so it wasn't anything wrong. It was just that on the scanners it shows up as kind of weird. So I have all my pens here. I organize them by colored microns, and then organized by size from smallest to largest tip. And then I do keep some of my extra stuff that I use in here. I always use a mechanical pencil for most of my designing. These I've found to be very useful. They're Skillcraft 1.1 millimeter, just mechanical pencils. I got a whole box of them and they've lasted me a really long time, and I love the erasers on them. They're not cheap erasers. They actually do a really good job of not smudging when I erase. I also have an eraser pencil. So this is made by Pentel. It's a number 2 eraser, click eraser. They are made in Japan, and I saw them all over the place in Japan, but you can get them in most art stores. This one I got in Blick. I also use, for the white, I use 2 different things. If I need to cover a large area of white, I use the Craftsmart paint pens. They do see through the page, so definitely test them if you want to use them in your own journals. It creates kind of like a smudgy residue on the opposite side of whatever you put it on. At least in my journal, it's what it does, and a couple of the other journals I've used it in, it does that as well. So you have to take that into account when you're designing. You have to make sure that the next page is going to have like dark ink or something that's going to cover up whatever you did on the opposite page. These are what I use the majority of the time for the white. They are just Jelly Roll white gel pens. They aren't the best. They're very temperamental, but they have the best effect, and I haven't been able to find anything that works better than these for the things that I want to do. As for my regular pens, I do use Microns. I use various sizes all the way from 005 all the way to 08. They are my favorite. The best things about the Micron pens is that they are archival, so they will last a very long time, and they're relatively affordable too. They're a little expensive for pens, but considering how good they are, they're well worth it. I do go through a lot of these. I would say I have to replace them at least once or twice a year just because I am drawing all the time with them. The other thing that I use is the Faber Castel big brush pens. I don't use these very often, but if I need to cover a large area with dark ink, I will use this just because it is archival ink and it's got a very big tip. So as you can see, it's got a very big tip. It covers a large area very quickly. And again, it's archival, so it'll last a very long time. Other than my Micron pens, I do use a couple other tools. I will use ballpoint pens for my color of the month occasionally. I try to stay away from using a lot of ballpoint pens just because they're not always archival, and so over time the color will change on the paper, or they'll seep through or cause deformations in the work. So I don't use them in my personal illustrations, but I will use them in my bullet journal just because it's personal and I'm not really trying to make something that's 100% archival. I also use occasionally pencils, a white pencil, if I think I've only used it once or twice in my bullet journal so far. But I use it if the gel pens and the paint pens aren't really blending well enough and there's still little gaps. I'll put the white pencil over it. This is a Chinese white Derwent drawing pencil. This was given to me as a tester pencil. I actually really like it, and when it runs out I will buy a new one. Other things that I use besides pens and pencils are stamps. I've started a little collection of stamps. This is probably my favorite purchase so far. It's the entire alphabet, obviously, and a couple of symbols. It's by Kai. I'm sure you can find a lot of different ones that work really well, but these ones have been my absolute favorite as far as decorating my bullet journal has gone. I also bought Studio G acid-free pigment ink to go with these stamps. It's worked pretty good so far. I might try something a little different next time, just because with white it is hard to get a good coverage, but it has worked pretty well so far. I also picked up some gold pigment ink. I haven't used it since my January spreads just because I haven't used gold again as the color of the month, but this is an Artnik 91 gold. I bought this in Japan and I really like it. I like the coverage, I like the shiny detail that it adds to the pieces that I have used it on. I also will use Winsor Newton ink. I don't do it as much in my bullet journal, but in a lot of my illustrations I actually do use dip pens. And so Winsor and Newton ink is the best ink that I've come across and the best ink that I recommend to use for illustrations and for my bullet journal. You can see I haven't used this in a while. But this is the gold ink. I also have black, and I've used greens and blues before. I just really like Winsor Newton. They're archival. They come out really, like, the ink is always really solid, nice ink. And the last thing I want to show you is washi tape. So washi tape has become really popular. I didn't really get why it was so popular until I bought some and started using it. It's great to be able to stick something in that I know I want to remove later, just because it doesn't ruin the paper, pull it up, or destroy it. You can, depending on the tack, you can pull it up and re-stick it a couple times and it will still stay. I just really like washi tape now, and I've been using it not only to decorate but also to reinforce. I used it on the edges of my bullet journal because I travel with my bullet journal, and so the edges were getting frayed, so I just put some washi tape on the end to kind of buffer it a little bit. And then I've also used it to reinforce the inside of my bullet journal. It's not as solid as duct tape is, so I can move it around or peel it off if I need to, but it also adds that little extra reinforcement to the bullet journal that I really need. So that's it for my supplies. I have provided links in the description box below to all the different supplies that I have talked about. They are Amazon affiliate links, which means at no additional cost to you. If you purchase through Amazon, through those links, I will get a kickback, which helps me to keep making videos. So as always, thanks for watching. Remember to live, love, and travel on. See you next week. Bye! I have my January memories, which is basically where I fill in all of the different things that I did in the month of January that I want to remember. You know, I make little drawings and graphics and things like that with the date and what happened.